Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to our video on how to handle errors in the workplace. So we're going to talk about from a leader's perspective and an individual contributor's perspective. So one thing's for sure is we're all going to make mistakes in the workplace. It's just a given. Some are bigger errors than others, but errors are going to happen. They always will. So it's one of those things where we just have to make sure that we are comfortable in how we handle them. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of those feelings when we make an error. So again, some are bigger than others. How we should handle those errors, when to involve others, when to handle ourselves, and from a leader's perspective of how to approach a team member, and then also when to advise your supervisor of situations. And same thing from an individual contributor's perspective. When do you just handle it yourself, and when should you bring in others? So let's kind of talk about those feelings and reactions. So it depends on the magnitude of the error, obviously. If it's a little error and it's not a big deal, you might feel badly, like maybe a customer relied on something that you said and it turned out that it was incorrect. Maybe a coworker relied on something you said that's incorrect. It's maybe not that big of a deal, and you just go and kind of say you're sorry and you feel badly. If it's a big error, we all have that, we all know that feeling. It's like dread, that panic, kind of that avoidance, the fear, things are running through your head like, oh my gosh, maybe you're trying to figure out how you can fix it yourself without maybe involving others, because someone is going to, have a reaction to it. One thing I can say is, usually errors, yeah, there's some big doozers that go on out there, but they're usually not as big of a deal as we think they are, first off. And if you can, let yourself calm down first before reacting and telling everybody and their brother. If you can, some of these situations, if it's a big, fat, nasty error that needs to be handled right away, obviously need to involve others. But keep yourself calm first. Think about what is the potential solution, and do I need to bring in others? Again, if it's a big one, you better be bringing in others, and that's what we're going to discuss. Another thing, always be accountable. Being accountable for an error that you've made always diffuses the situation. So approaching, whether it's your supervisor or a customer or a coworker, and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I made an error. People understand that people are human. They make errors. So we're accountable for the error. It always diffuses a situation. So let's talk about, let's talk about handling errors from an individual contributor's perspective. And this is a good segue what we just talked about. Hold yourself accountable regardless of the magnitude of the error. That's first and foremost, is to hold yourself accountable. Don't blame others. Hold yourself accountable for the error. Again, whether it's to a customer that you made the boo-boo, hold yourself accountable to the supervisor. It's always best when someone says, and think about this from your own perspective, if someone says, I made an error, I'm so sorry, here's how I'm going to fix it. You're more apt to understand. It's when people say, well, it wasn't my fault, it was so-and-so's fault. People aren't going to understand that because they're the one that's affected by the error, right? So it's always good to just say, I'm accountable for it, I'm sorry, and here's how we're going to fix it. Again, people just want to make sure there's a prompt solution to something, and that's getting sorted out. Don't hide the error. Oh man, I've seen this before when people try to hide something. The errors sooner or later rear their ugly head, and it really escalates the situation. And not just that, is that it then instills a lack of trust to whether it's the customer, the supervisor, the coworker, whoever it's impacting. You have like that lack of trust, like, what else are they not telling me? So don't hide the error. Now, if it's a minor error, maybe there was issued maybe a payment incorrectly to a customer. It's something that you can easily fix, and it was just a little error. You can handle it yourself. That's no big deal. That happens. But if you're new to an operation, my advice is to advise that manager of if there was an error, whether it's a minor one or not, just so that you can calibrate with that manager on what they want to know and when they don't want to be involved in. They'll tell you after a while. If you keep coming to them when it's not that big of a deal, they'll say, oh, you can just handle that yourself. I don't need to be involved. But it's good to calibrate with your manager, because that starts instilling trust with them to you. Though, if you start bringing in situations on a regular basis, they're going to start thinking, okay, I can trust that person to bring to my attention when something is incorrect. That's a huge issue with manager and team members. They want to make sure that there's a trusting relationship, whether it's from an individual contributor's perspective or a manager's perspective. And some of these things, that I'm talking about, it's a two-way street. So if a supervisor obviously makes an error that impacts an individual contributor, it's the same thing. Don't hide it. Tell people, tell the person, tell the team member about it, because again, that instills trust. If it's a moderate or a major error, let's talk about those big doozer errors. And again, they're going to happen, especially as you get into situations where maybe it's a new opportunity for you and you're really a little bit in over your head. Sometimes you make some bad errors. I know I have. So again, number one thing, hold yourself accountable. Fess up. Tell your supervisor as soon as possible. This diffuses the situation. It may be a bad one, but again, if you hold yourself accountable, it's going to diffuse it. What's the solution? Because if it's a big one, if it's a big problem, they're going to want to know, what's your solution? They may or may not agree. They may have other things that need to happen to contain the problem and prepare the solution, but remain calm. The last thing that somebody wants to do is freak out on someone and come in the office and they're cursing and crying and going on up. Be calm. And be prepared to be asked, what are you going to do differently going forward? So supervisor is probably going to ask you that. What are you going to do differently going forward? It's a pretty common question to ask. Always learn from your mistake. Obviously, we're going to make mistakes. The biggest thing is that we need to learn from it. And most importantly, even though maybe people feel badly and we want to dwell on it and we're not feeling good, we bring it home, we're feeling sad and all that, move on. The best thing to do is, it happened. You can't fix the past. You can only fix the present and move on going forward. And really, if you can leave it, the best thing I can say is leave it. It happened. It's not good. You learn from it, so that is good, and move on. Move forward. Just don't get stuck in this situation, that feeling. Move forward. So let's talk about what not to do on handling errors. We talked about this. Do not hide it. Do not try to fix something that probably can't be fixed yourself. This leads to a lack of trust. This is bad news. This is something that could lead into potential performance management issues. But the biggest thing is it leads to a lack of trust. You want to maintain that trust factor in the workplace. That's very, very, very important for all of us as employees. Don't try to fix it outside of the acceptable protocol. Man, I've seen doozers like this too, where people try to kind of jerry-rig something and it's not really the right protocol, and they're doing something that they know is not right, and they're just hoping that they don't get caught. And they do get caught, and it's not good, and it leads to bad things. So don't try to fix something outside of acceptable protocol. Do not blame others. Even if maybe somebody else was part of the problem, accept the accountability. And maybe you can explain the situation holistically without blaming others. Throwing someone under a bus, never a good idea. What else not to do? Inappropriate behavior. Screaming, cursing, hitting the desk, hanging up the phone. No. Obviously, that just escalates the situation, creates this horrible energy all around, and can potentially lead to performance management problems, again, because of inappropriate behavior. If you're cursing and screaming and scaring people on the floor or scaring a customer, things of that nature. Again, be calm. If you need to process, your feelings, go take a walk, whatever the case may be, but remain calm, because again, that can escalate into even a worse situation. So let's talk about handling errors from a manager's perspective. Again, managers are accountable for their team, everybody in their team. It's one thing that, you signed up as a manager and a leader. You're accountable for your team. If a team member makes a mistake, you're accountable for your team's errors. That's just part of the job. You're managing them. So even if Johnny makes a boo-boo, you're accountable for it. So that is something that always have respect for, that you're always accountable for your own errors and your team errors. But if your team member made a mistake, you know they're already going to feel badly. So, the more that you stay calm when there's a situation, especially a bigger type of mistake, be calm. It doesn't help if everybody's mad and angry and getting upset. You want to lead by example, so be calm. What is the solution? Again, this is the same thing as an individual contributor. You want to know, does the team member, what is the solution? You may need to be part of the solution. There are a lot of times where maybe somebody isn't as well versed as yourself, as the manager, and you present solutions. But the big thing is just remain calm and be understanding. Most likely, even if the manager's like, oh my gosh, how could they have made that error? Be understanding. Most of the employees, they already feel badly. They feel horrible. They're going to bring it home. They're going to be talking about it. They feel awful. You don't need to make them feel any worse than they probably already do. So be understanding. Let them know that errors are going to happen, and that what you want to do is make sure that they learn from it, and what are they going to do differently going forward. So that's a key question. What are they going to do differently going forward? But be understanding and let them know, errors happen. They do. I made errors all the time, and I made some big blunders, and I learned from them, and I didn't make quite as big of blunders, and they kind of just sort of get a little bit smaller and smaller. But the point is, I made errors, and I still, had a successful career. So you can still make mistakes and move forward. Reiterate that mistakes will be made. We just talked about this. You learn from it and move on. Do not get stuck in it. Do not let it hinder your confidence in decision making, because then as an individual contributor, you're hired probably to make decisions. So don't let that hinder your decision making. And the bottom line is, when you're a manager, sometimes an individual contributor comes into your office and they're thinking they made the world's biggest error, and it's really not even that big of a deal. It's pretty minor. Most of the time, that's been my experience, that people would come into my office and say, oh my gosh, I made this huge error, and I'm listening to it, and I'm waiting for the big punchline, and it's like, it's not even that big of a deal, and it's a pretty easy solution. So, you just kind of keep the situation calm and lead by example, and be empathetic, be compassionate, and let them know, if it is a big deal, it might have to lead to some sort of performance management, but it doesn't mean that someone's a bad person. It means they made a mistake, and there may be a consequence, but most of the time it's not that. But let's talk about if it's handling errors for management. If it's a big error, okay, these are the ones these are the doozer ones. These are something where maybe it is costing the company extra money to handle, or the protocol was broken, or something really major is going on. Just like an individual contributor, advise your manager as soon as possible. It's the same principle as the individual contributor. If you don't advise your manager when something big's going down and they have to find out later, your trust has gone down the tubes. That trust is really important between each layer of management. Always be accountable for your team. It's even if it's a major mistake, you're accountable for the team. I know that in my branch manager career, there were a lot of errors that were made by my team members. I was accountable for the team because I'm leading the team. I'm leading them. They should understand what's going on because I'm the leader. Well, sometimes people don't. It happens. But I'm accountable for the team. Okay. Always advise the supervisor of the solution and how you're going to avoid it going forward, because that's what managers going to want to know. How are you going to avoid it going forward? So they want to know, what's the situation, what is the solution, and how is it going to be avoided going forward, right? So if you're a manager, bring people in. The other thing is, and I've always said this to all my managers, is if it's a huge issue, you want to bring as many people into that boat, especially if it's sinking, as possible, so that other people know about it, other people can present solutions, and those are the big errors. And I've been in, those kind of like nasty situations myself. But get as many people involved as possible. It's a really big error. Let's talk about what not to do. Handling errors, what not to do if you're a manager. I've seen this. Hiding it and avoiding telling others. Oh my gosh, especially if it's a big error. People are trying to fix it. They're not telling their manager. It blows sky high. Their manager finds out through the grapevine, or because maybe something was found on a report. Like, what's going on here? Not good. Obviously, I've seen some very negative consequences when that's happened to managers, but do not hide it and don't avoid telling others. Just be accountable and tell your manager. Again, don't blame others. If it's your team member that's made a boo-boo, you're the manager. You're accountable for it. Now granted, can you sit there and control every employee? No, but you're accountable for it. I mean, that's just part of a manager's job. But blaming others never, ever, ever looks good. Inappropriate behavior, we've talked about this, and I've seen some managers are cursing or screaming. Don't do that. It's like, you're leading by example. You obviously don't want anybody doing that, because that's going to lead to something, again, maybe performance management for the manager. And the big thing, never belittle employees or berate them if they made an error, especially on the floor, even in a closed setting behind closed doors. Don't belittle employees or berate them. They made an error, everybody should be treated with respect, regardless of how big the error is or not. People feel badly, but belittling people and berating them is never a good idea. You want to lead by example and be, again, understanding, even if you're upset inside, like, oh, how could they have done that? Just be empathetic, come up with a solution, and move forward. So let's wrap this up in a bow. Errors are going to happen. They just are. If you're an individual contributor or you're managing a team, those errors are going to happen. It's just a matter of how we handle it is the key. Advise your supervisors, if necessary, as soon as possible. If it's a big error, notify them. Don't hide it. Don't go outside of protocol. Don't try to stuff it under the table. It's not going away. Just deal with the situation. Be calm about it. Be accountable for it. You blew it. That's okay. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just means you made an error. Don't blame people. Make sure you have a solution. Learn from mistakes. Again, mistakes are feedback. If you want to look at it that way, they're just feedback. So there's no labeling on it. There's no labeling of you're bad, you're good, you're this, you're that. It just means it's a boo-boo. And it's feedback. You learn from it, and you move forward. And you don't get stuck in it. You don't get your confidence rattled by it. You will for a little bit, probably. That's human nature. But just move forward and celebrate the accomplishments. You might make another error again, but the more that you kind of go through the process and you deal with it in the same sort of process of stay calm, be accountable, come up with a solution, learn from it, move forward, you'll find that you'll start being proactive in avoiding errors before they become an issue. And when there is an error, you'll know how to handle it and just kind of keep diffusing it. So I hope you have enjoyed our video on how to handle errors in the workplace from either a leader's perspective or an individual contributor's perspective. And for additional resources or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com. Email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com or call me at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and have a very empowered day.